I'd just like to thank GRDC and the group at all for the opportunity to talk to you today. And I just think how lucky we are as consultants and advisors to the rural sector to have opportunities for professional development days like the next 2 days. And it's GRDC's foresight really that does that for us. And so I just think, we should all be thankful for that, and I certainly am. The other thing is I was looking at the list of people who were talking to you, my competition, people in the other rooms, and it does look like we have a great plethora of researchers and scientists all working for us and our industries, and some of them have got some fantastic findings and results that they share with you at this occasion. And I thought, actually I don't have much research and I don't have many findings, but what I do have is 15 years of experience and observations of watching farming families work through business continuance, secession, and sometimes exiting from the sector. So that's what I'm going to share with you today. And I'm also going to share a few tips about encouraging you guys who work with those people, those farming businesses and families, about raising the issue or encouraging people to look at it and seeing what role you can play in that. I very much feel that advisors and consultants are very much at the coalface when it comes to working with farming family businesses. And that is because you probably meet with them regularly. You're often there when they're doing their planning or when they're making changes to their businesses, growing it or buying stuff. You very much are there with them. And some of you live in the communities as well, so you see people not only at work but at play. So you're probably in a position where you understand the relationships that are going on between families and businesses as well, and also the environment that they're in, that they're working in. So there are a whole gamut of consultants that help run farming businesses today. I think a while back, through the encouragement of one organisation, I wrote a list about how many are involved in our family business. And it was something like 25, which is phenomenal. I kept thinking, we're growing a ton of wheat to feed all these other people. But they are there for a purpose. They are there to help us make financial decisions, to be there when we need them legally, to give us support in business structures and avoiding tax and all that stuff. And guys like, who are helping us in the field grow crops and environmental sustainability, and people like myself who go into families to help them, to be the neutral conduit for conversation. I suppose my one message out of all of this is that I strongly believe that we as businesses do need all those people, and that no one person has the answer for us, that we do need to collect information from everywhere. So when you're there as a consultant and an advisor, there are a whole lot of observations that you will no doubt make. Who's communicating with whom, recognising who's driving a business, who's holding it back, who's withdrawing, recognising if someone's driving a business but leaving everyone else behind. So there's all these observations you can see. And one of the reasons I'm asking you to look for those signs, look for those things, is because often the people in the middle of it, in the middle of those businesses, don't know what they look like. They don't know what they're struggling with. And an outsider can sometimes shine some light on that. So as a consultant and an advisor, you are in a position where you can raise that subject or issue if you feel game enough. Also in your best interest as a consultant, so that you know that you've got a business into the future that you're working with, so that you've got customers, so that you've got clients in the future. You are in a privileged position, and if you feel you have the skills or you have or that you could, you can raise these issues. When we're asked to talk at these functions, we're asked to have take-home messages. I really struggle with it, and after looking at the article that I've put in the booklet, it was all a bit long-winded, so I've come up with 4 things that I'd like you to think about and we'll talk about a bit later on. They are: be inquisitive, ask the questions, share the air, ensure everybody gets an opportunity to talk equally, stick to the issue, depersonalise things, make sure the issue or the event is the topic, not the person, and look to the future. History, or what's happened before, is a great platform for moving forward on. We can't go back and change the past, but we can use it to move forward with. So that's what I encourage. So you've got that: be inquisitive, share the air, stick to the issue, and look to the future. Okay, also one person, one conversation, one at a time. Don't get completely overwhelmed by everything and all that's going on. Just recognise that every time you have an opportunity to have a conversation with someone, that can make a difference. Now, recognising patterns in family businesses or in families, often we're in a position where we can see where there is negative events or detrimental events, and if we're able to raise people's awareness to those, there is an opportunity for change. The other downside to those negative events or discontents is that often there's quite a lot of chaos created from addressing it. So it can be really uncomfortable. So there's chaos before we get consolidation. But we must look at that chaos as the opportunity for change and not shy away from it, not run away from it. So again, I say people exterior to the family or the business can provide the conduit for making some of that chaos and then making some of that change. Now, there are some events that can create that chaos, and some of them are what we call front end and back end events. Front end when people are entering the business, back end when people are wanting to exit. And there are also some key communication stages in a family business, and they are when there are people entering the family or the business, and they can be when there's 2 generations or 3 generations in a business. The way that the generations approach things are slightly different. The language that generations use are slightly different. Even a simple thing like, I can hear a son saying, well, I think we ought to grow oats. And the father saying, we tried that in 64 and it didn't work then, so it won't work now. You know, the stalling, the stopping, that sort of stuff. So it's about talking to one another and understanding what we're saying, not just hearing it. So also the communication about how someone joining the family, what that means. Does it mean if someone's marrying into the family, does it mean they're marrying into the business? Is it, are young women's names put on the business for taxation reasons and that's all? And what impact does that have on that young woman's ability to earn or pay tax or whatever else? So get some very clear understanding about the 2 different roles and responsibilities. What does it mean to belong to the family? What does it mean to belong to the business? And again, as you see this happen to those businesses or families that you work with, there is an opportunity for you to ask the questions. You don't actually have to have the solutions, you just have to encourage the conversation. I suppose on that note, I should mention that I was watching an agricultural agronomist the other day, and he was doing the planning meeting for the year, and there was a discussion about summer weeds. And you'll all do this, I'm guessing. He had a recipe, he had a timing, and he had an outcome. So he just told them exactly what to do, how to do it, and what they could expect. And I thought, oh my gosh, this man is built for trigger response. He gets a phone call, he has a recipe, has a timing thing, and he tells you how it's going to be. And I'm thinking that is so different to to working with families who are having to sort out problems or issues that they have within their family. So I'm thinking this is going to be difficult for some of you not to want to jump in with a solution, not to jump in with if somebody brings this subject up, I'll have to find an answer for them. In fact, I strongly believe that families have the solutions to their business within themselves as groups of people. What they sometimes can't do is get that conversation happening to ensure that everybody has a say and that they reach some common ground. I digress. Front end stuff is often about money, housing, time and communication. Okay, so money is the person joining the business going to be paid? Does the business have the capacity to pay? If not, how are we going to address that? What's included in that remuneration package? Is it house, car, phone, those sort of things? Get that decided at the beginning so that it doesn't build up over years, someone feeling like they're working for nothing. Also, if the business doesn't have the capacity to pay, how will that be addressed? How will that shortfall be addressed? Transfer into a loan account that can one day buy a business or buy a parcel of land. The other thing is time, and we often see the time create anxiety between the generations. Do you work, how many days a week, how many hours are there in a day to start with? Is it daylight till dusk? How many days in a week is it expected that you work every day or 5 days? Does this business, the people in this business, take holidays? These are questions that you guys can ask casually about whether they've thought about and addressed as you see a new person enter a business. The other thing's housing, and this actually goes further than the business, it actually affects the family. I often see young people or young women end up in houses that don't belong to them. They belong either to a trust or a company or an individual. They have a desire to turn this derelict house into a home. They invest money, time and emotions into making this house a home, only to find out that one day it might belong to some other member of the family or it still doesn't belong to them. So get that sort of stuff talked about at the beginning so that there is less resentment as you move through time. And communication. How is communication going to happen when we go from working with a husband and wife team and including a son? How does that communication happen when it doesn't happen over the kitchen table or in the bathroom or whatever's going on? When you're including more people in the business, how's that communication going to happen? Does it happen at the back of the ute with a shotgun conversation about what you're going to do for the day? Or does it happen as you're driving away, shouting out the window the instructions about what's going to happen for the day? Or is there a designated time in business time to discuss it and talk it through and work through with diaries? Back end stuff is more about what's happened in family history, whether a person is leaving because they're discontent, because of injury, because of health, because they're tired, or because they're retiring. So each of those, if it's happened in the generations before and it was successful, then it might be fine just to let it evolve. But if the past was not so well handled, then one has to make a conscious decision to do it differently. Also, I say about retirement, if that's what's happening, is that it's important there is independent tenure, a house that's separate from the farm, from economic downturn, and from drought and from disaster. In income, an independent income. Some of the income may be able to come from the farming business, but it's useful to have income that isn't tied to farming, that isn't tied to drought, downturn and disaster. So it just sort of helps things through. And also, what are they going to do? It's my observations that most farmers are pretty busy people. They're quite task orientated, and the idea of moving into town and doing nothing terrifies them to hell, and they think they're going to die. So, it's useful to understand that all those wonderful skills that they've had as farmers can be transferred to other things, community, sport, whatever. So they're the sorts of things that need to be talked about and encouraged, that they have these wonderful skills that are definitely transferable. And also the communication patterns, again, if we see stuff that hasn't worked so well in the past, how that happens and how that communication happens. So the other thing I encourage, and I also think that all of us as consultants and advisors are in a position to not only encourage but to do, is to make our businesses, make farming family businesses look like businesses.
So whenever you're in a position to have a family or a farming meeting, even if it's just about planning the cropping for the next 12 months, or in discussion about buying the next door neighbour out, or purchasing something big and green, that it looks like a business meeting. When you go in to have a meeting with them, encourage them to make it look business-like. That the discussion's shared, somebody takes notes, that people act in their adult, they act like they're in business. Allowing for, in business time, all those important decisions to be made, so that when they have family time, it looks like family time. So when we are discussing buying the next door neighbour, buying a new green machine, ramping up and borrowing money, it is not appropriate that that happens on 2 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon at a child's second birthday party after they've had too much to drink. That is not where it should happen. It should happen in business time, and you should allow time in business time to get that happening. So all of us can participate in that. All of us can encourage that look. And separating family and business is a really difficult thing to do. It needs practice and it needs supporting. And I know when I said to my lot, there is no business talk around our kitchen table when you come to dinner, and one of them said, Jude, that'll never work. We've got nothing else in common. You really have to work at it and you really have to practice. And I think all of us as consultants can encourage that practice. So I'm thinking that in some of your cases you're thinking, there's no way I'm ever going to discuss this with people or bring this subject up or even go there. I had a colleague from Victoria ring me and he said, I've been asked to go into this meeting, this family meeting, and he said, listen, I just don't want to go. I said, well, what's the problem? And he said, well, I've been working with them for 15 years. There are some huge issues. And I said, okay, so there's a bit of a can of worms. Oh, he said, a 44-gallon drum worth of worms, he says. And then I said to him, well, how many are out on the table? How many of the worms are out on the table? Oh, probably none of them or just a few. And I said, so what are you frightened of? He said, the whole can of worms will open up on the day and it'll just be chaos and I'll get caught in the middle of it and look really bad. And I said, well, hang on a minute, who do the can of worms belong to? And he said, well, it's their can of worms. I said, so what are you frightened of? It's not your can of worms. And then he said, oh, I just don't, I'm really worried about losing them as a customer and losing them as a client. And then I said, well, if you're not there and the can of worms gets open, you could still lose them as a client. He said, oh, yeah, possibly. And I said, just go in knowing that every conversation, anything you say, as long as you go with good intent and that you don't try and find solutions for them, that you encourage them to find the solution, you'll be okay. It'll be all right. But don't be frightened of being the can opener. Because that's probably what he was terrified of, him opening the can of worms. Anyway, then I said to him, listen, what's stopping you from being the can opener here? What's worrying you? And I said, is it reminding you of something? He said, oh yeah, our situation with my dad, remember? And he said, that's why I'm consulting, because the can of worms was awful and I got chucked out. And I said, well, don't take that stuff with you. If you can put your can of worms, the can of worms that belongs to you, all that stuff about what happened to you, if you can park that in the car and lock it in the car and go into the meeting knowing that this isn't your can of worms, using all that stuff and all that experience that you have to help them move through their can of worms, you're doing them a favour. Either that, find out what the can of worms are, or a bit of what might be going on, and get someone else to come in and sort that out for you. That someone else is going to make you look fantastic. Like, someone else can be responsible for that. So if you're fearful of making something worse, work out what it is you're frightened of. Fair enough, you might decide not to go there, but if you can, so that you have got them as a client in the future, it may be worthwhile. Also, state up front, it's not your area of expertise. This isn't what you do. Try not to find solutions for them. Tell them it is their problem and they need to sort it out. Encourage them to have conversations with other people and seek other professional help. Be the conduit. You don't have to solve the problem. Also, these are often crucial conversations where opinions vary, the stakes are high, everybody's got something to lose, and opinions differ, and it's really important that we find a solution. Now, these crucial conversations need to be handled, and it takes quite a lot of practice to get them and handle them well in any situation. And very sadly, we often avoid them. We don't go near it. When the subject comes up, we even change it. When we do face them, sometimes we handle them really badly, and like that looks terrible. That's awful and leaves us feeling really battered. Or sometimes we handle them well. Now, anytime you've handled a crucial conversation well, go back and reflect on what you did right, because you're doing something right to get to a point where you reach consensus. But recognise that we're often at our worst. We often get hit with crucial conversations when we are underprepared. They come as a surprise, and they're often spontaneous. So what happens, and some of you will know more about this than me, is that we respond with the fight-flight mechanism, where all the blood in our brain drains to our feet and our hands. Now, I don't know, but I'm not so good making decisions with my feet and my hands. And the one time you really need your brain to work for you, it's not. So we have to practice a few things about how we can regain the blood in our brains so that we can have adult crucial conversations. So we just have to understand that we are designed wrong, but there are things that we can do to practice. So to practice for a success, be inquisitive. I used to write this on my hand once, because as you've probably no doubt gathered, I quite like to talk, and I can talk quite a lot. So in fact, being inquisitive is asking the question and listening to the response. That's the bit I have difficulty with, listening to the response. Do it with good heart. Do it with the right intent. You want to get an outcome. You want it to be good for as many people as possible. What do you really want? What do you want for yourself? What do you want for others? What do you want for this organisation or business? And for that relationship and for all that to work, how do I behave so that I get that result? Okay? So, be inquisitive. The next thing, share the air. Ensure that you have everybody participating in the conversation. That may require a little bit of stopping and starting. It may require questioning people who aren't contributing. It also may require shutting people down who are having too much to say. So if you get the chance to practice this on people that you know well, or practice it in your family, it's useful for when you need it and you're under pressure. Also try and halt any discussions that are destructive. We're wanting to concentrate on positive things, so you can rephrase things so that it's not so destructive. And also name the behaviour. Like if you see someone resisting or someone standing back, name what it is. They may not even be aware they're doing it. So if you say, why are you being so resistant? Or why are you being so angry? And they go, I'm not angry. You can ascertain what it is that's stalling them or stopping them. The other thing is stick to the issue. Encourage discussion about the event, not the person. And discourage personal attacks. So if if he says, like, I'm really angry, he's made me angry because he's left the gate open in the shearing shed, it's actually the gate being left open and the extra work that has been created that's made you angry, not necessarily his actions perhaps, but not him. So it's about working out what the issue or the event is and trying not to be too personal. The other thing is look to the future. Encourage people whenever you can to be thinking about where you're going next, what the next thing is, what we need. So, it's one thing to talk about the past and bring the past up all the time, but encourage discussion about the future. So recognise that you, as individuals, can make a difference, one conversation, one person, one at a time. Ensure if you don't feel comfortable doing this, you can perhaps find people around you who can mentor you or help you as you move through practicing some of this. And certainly days like today puts you in touch with lots of people and mentors and contacts that can support and help you. So build a list of contacts for yourself and also perhaps some for your clients. So try to remember, inquisitive, share the air, stick to the issue and look to the future. I think that's it, Richard. Thank you.